Thank you for covering what I needed to in the introduction, so I can just sort of jump straight into what we're about tonight. So there are two intentions that I have for this session. One is to give you some resources that are available to you for free, that are ways that you can learn more about the members of Congress that you and your group are supporting. The other piece of that is, how do you take what you've learned about your member of Congress and connect it either as a way to make a personal connection with that member, or to connect our issues with what the member is interested in. And that's sort of the woven throughout. I am not an expert at that. Our grassroots impact and legislative staff are the best people to tell you, why is this member important, and what how would you message results to them. But we definitely can talk tonight about some of the approaches that groups have used over time, and hopefully that will get you starting feeling more comfortable with that. The handout that you currently see on your screen will be sent to all of you afterwards, so I don't want anyone to feel like they have to scramble to write down URLs or take notes. I just wanted you to see that it exists, and you'll get it as a Word document with live links to the websites that I mentioned. So you'll have that as a resource, as well as the recording. As Lisa mentioned, a number of you were really generous with giving me ideas of who to use as examples tonight. I'm going to end up probably only covering 3 or 4 members of Congress. And that is more than what you all sent me. And so my promise to you is that for every name that I got, I'll do sort of a little one-pager on some ways to approach doing research about them and send it out to you. And I also want you to know that if you ever want a presentation like this done just for your group, so that you can get practice with your 2 senators and the 2 or 3 members of the House that you cover, I would be happy to do it. And then we could spend all of our time on your particular needs. But hopefully the way we talk about the way I'm able to talk about them, and then the way we will discuss some things later, we'll all learn something, even if we're not covering your member. So the first thing I like to show, and here's first piece of challenge, making sure that my screen actually flip. You see my screen flip, because I am switching over now to showing you a web page, and hopefully that is what is now coming up. If you do not, the page is loaded now. So if you don't see it on your screen, put that in the chat for Lisa so that we know that, that there's a problem. The first thing I want to tell you about is a resource that is available on the results webpage. You get it through following the link Current Volunteers that is right at the top. And then there is a side action, which your beautiful faces is covering up, I imagine. But there's a choice in the right column under Current Volunteers. There's a choice that says Legislator Lookup.
We're not quite seeing it yet, Allison.
So did you not switch at all, or is it just not loaded?
No. Doesn't look like it's loaded.
Okay, so that probably means I'm not sharing it correctly. I'm gonna stop the share and start it again. Can you see it now?
Nope. It's loading.
So at least it changed.
There we go. We have how to contact a representative at the top.
Good, good. So I went from Current Volunteers right here at the top of the page. That is on every page of the results website. You can see that Current Volunteers. And then there's a right column of choices that is also always resident in the frame. And Legislator Lookup is right here under Lisa's face. And we get to this how to contact your representative. This directory is a directory that is paid for by results. So you would not be able to just browse to this if you weren't if you didn't know that it was an embedded directory and results. So it's a really nice tool that they've given us. One of the irritations of this tool is that the only way to search it is by address, which is fine if you are talking about your member of Congress, because you know your address. But if to do it as a demo, my first person is a senator, John Hoeven from North Dakota. So I know the zip code, a zip code in North Dakota. But even though he represents the entire state, it still wants a street address. So just as a hint for those of you who are trying to research people who are not your own representatives, I always use the address of one of their district offices in the state, because the district offices have to be in the district, which means that's a legitimate address in the district. And now I will see all of the people who represent someone who lives at 220 East Rosser Avenue. And the president and the vice president represent you. Your two senators represent you, and then Kelly Armstrong is the member of the House for that district. So I'm interested in John Hoeven, and I am now browsing to the directory entry that is part of this tool that's been given to us. So here we have a picture. The first thing we'll land on is contact information. So you'll get both the DC office address and at least one district office address. If it ever comes to pass that we are able to have face-to-face meetings in offices again with members of Congress, you might well meet in the district in Bismarck. And if you did that, there's a good chance you would need to schedule that through the district contact. So that's why it's very nice that they've provided you with a district phone number here. Most of the rest of your scheduling is going to be done through the DC office, and the DC office's phone number is also listed here. A website is provided to you. This is the official Senate website for John Hoeven, and some social media contacts if you want to follow on Facebook or Twitter, or I imagine there are people on Instagram and maybe TikTok, who knows. If they have a social media presence, it will be provided in this directory. The next thing the directory gives you is some personal information. And this is where I start looking for what about this person as an individual might have a connection to me. So maybe someone in your group went to Dartmouth. And you can have an ice-breaking conversation about, is this professor still there? What did you major in? How did you like living in New Hampshire? What made you decide to go there? That kind of thing. You also see that his previous occupations were as bank executives, and if anyone in your group works in a bank, that would be a point of contact. Another way you could use this is, you can imagine he probably still has connections in the banking industry. So what if someone in your group or someone that you are connected to is an executive in a bank now? That person might well know him personally and might be in a position to help you get a meeting with him. So this is the way you can start using connections to what you know about him to get you closer to even just getting the meeting, much less starting to talk about results issues. Sometimes I just think it's fun if they have the same birthday you do, so I always double check that. I've never found one yet that did share my birthday, but I keep looking. He proudly indicates that he has a spouse and 2 children and 3 grandchildren. Grandchildren are always a great way to connect with people. Isn't it great that you have that, isn't being a grandparent great? Do your grandkids live nearby? How often do you see them? That kind of thing. And then they provide you with a religious affiliation if one is known. And what I find interesting about this is that if they are part of a religion that has a national or international organizational structure, those faiths almost always have a social justice arm to them. So there's a social justice there are social justice organizations within Judaism. There are social justice organizations within Islam. Certainly, there are Catholic social justice organizations, and most mainline Protestant denominations have them. And if you are comfortable doing this and sort of bringing their religion forward in your relationship with them, you can find out what the Roman Catholic Church's position is on our housing issues, or on vaccine equity, or on basic education for all, or for tax policy. And then you can use their messaging as a way to make a connection with this office. And certainly if you yourself share the faith of the representative, that is another point of connection between you that you can use to build your relationship. The next thing it will have is this political tab, which tells you when they took office, and then almost always tells you what committees they are on. And the committees they are on is important because some committees are more important in our work than others. So for example, the housing committees, the tax committees, the budget committee are all very important, and the agriculture committee are all very important in our US poverty work. The appropriations committee and the foreign affairs committees are very important in our global work. So if your representative is on one of those committees, they are going to be working very closely at the policy level. And we will be telling you, meet with them, you need to be talking to them, you need to make sure results priorities are showing up in the legislative work that they are doing. If your member is not on one of those committees though, that's fine. One of the best ways that members of Congress learn about issues is from each other. So if your member isn't on one of the committees, they know someone who is, and you want to be talking to them and asking them to talk to the leadership of those committees or their good buddies who are on the committees to make sure results priorities show up in the legislation. At the bottom line, that's what we're going for. And your member matters whether they're on the committee or not. But if they are on the committee, it is always good to know that going in, because their relationship to the actions that need to be taken will be different. And it's just nice to know that and know what it will, know what impact you're having when you talk to them. The reason there are no committees showing here right now is the Senate is very, very far behind in getting their committee structure going. As of the middle of the day today, the Senate was still showing a Republican majority and Republican chairs of all of the committees. So they just haven't gotten everything settled yet because the Senate didn't flip until the inauguration. Whereas the House has been working on their setup since January 3rd, and they're a little bit farther ahead in getting some of that information in. So it will show up here, it just isn't here now. The reason I'm using John Hoeven as an example though, is because in the past, he has been on both the Agriculture Committee, which is important for our US poverty work, and he was on the Appropriations Committee, which is important for our global work. And there's every chance that he will continue on those committees and will continue to be an important voice in in those particular areas. The next thing there will be is a tab with staff. It's really, you never have to call an office and know who it is that you are talking to, who you want to talk to. You can call and say, please connect me to the scheduler, or may I please talk to the person who handles tax policy, or whatever it is that you need to do. But it can be really fun to know who it's supposed to be. And so this staff directory just sort of gives you a little bit of an in. Now, and here I'm looking for the scheduler. It says that it's Sydney Fitzpatrick. So now I know that if I want to schedule something, I'm going to call and ask for Sydney or Sydney Fitzpatrick. Something that sometimes shows up here is what areas the legislative assistance covers. So we can see that there's a national security advisor. We can see there's an energy policy advisor, but we don't see which one of these many legislative aides and assistants cover health, cover education, cover tax, cover foreign affairs. It's not clear. And like I said, you can just call and ask to be connected to the right person. However, it turns out that there is a more detailed version of this directory that the staff have access to, and they have provided it also to the regional coordinators. The regional coordinators are a collection of volunteers who support groups who help the grassroots impact team support groups in their success. So we can look that up, and we can sometimes find more information about what the jobs are of each of these people. And in this particular case, okay, we're going to see if my screen switches. That's not the right one. I wonder, can I move this? Okay. I'm nervous about trying to click on something and then shutting down the whole thing, which would be really embarrassing. So I will tell you that the more detailed directory for John Hoeven does show that that the legislative director or the deputy legislative director, Tyler Hardy, covers almost all of the issues that we advocate around: appropriations, budget, tax. The only thing he doesn't do is international affairs, and that is the National Security Advisor, Josh Carter. So my point is, if you ever want that kind of detailed information, you should absolutely feel free to contact either the person who is the regional coordinator for your group, or if you're not sure who that is, contact me, because I'm a regional coordinator, or contact one of the grassroots impact staff, and we will be happy to look that up for you. It's a shame they don't provide it to everyone, but we can get it for you. So, and then finally, there's this bills choice. This is a place where all of the bills that results is tracking get collected so that you can quickly see how this member of Congress has acted on bills that we care about. And so this is the update for the 115th Congress, which is 2 Congresses ago. And we can see that there were 3 bills. Okay, I should have looked at this more carefully. They're House bills, and he's a senator. So I'm not, the way this is supposed to work, we're going to pretend this is working correctly. The way this is supposed to work is it shows you the bills, it shows you whether it passed or failed, it shows you how he voted, and it shows you whether that was what results wanted. So the X means that he voted, he didn't vote the way results would have lobbied. This check mark on the last one means that he did. The nice thing about this, with the caveat of if it's accurate, is that this is something to thank him for. And it's always important to be able to go into your meetings with something to say about something they have done. And there's another resource Results provides you with called the Congressional Scorecard, which is another one of the choices here on the right side, right here. This Congri Scorecard behind Lisa's face is the Congressional Scorecard. That's a downloadable spreadsheet that was last updated yesterday. So it's kept quite up to date. It has to be updated by the staff of every results action that can be confirmed. So anytime we ask someone to co-sponsor a bill, anytime we ask someone to sign on to a sign-on letter, if there is physical evidence that they did it, it shows up in the scorecard. And the scorecard is a really great way to again, find things that they have done that you can thank them for, or just see how active they've been on results issues in the past. And even if you have a brand new member of Congress, so obviously they have no actions on the scorecards for the past years, sometimes it's interesting to go and see what their predecessor did, so that when you go in, you can say, well, your predecessor was always really supportive of our issues around the earned income tax credit. So I really hope that we can continue to have a strong voice from this congressional district on that issue. So even if you don't have a track record for your current member, you can for the past member. So this is what this directory looks like for a person who has been in office for a while. But guess what happens if it's a brand new member? So several of you decided to challenge me and asked me to do this demo around Lauren Boebert. And I'm not 100% sure I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. She's a brand new rep from Colorado. And and brand new means potentially a lot less information. So we'll use her office, 303 North Main. Here she is. And email address, no email. No district office list is district offices listed, no social media listed. There's not even a personal tab. The personal tab is completely missing. The political tab, again, only shows that she took office on January 3rd of 2021. She does have committee assignments, but they were just made 2 days ago and they haven't shown up in this directory yet. But they do have a very nice staff list. So this is a starting point. We can find her scheduler, Jeannie Davidovich, and start making some connections. But at this point, this will get more robust, but at this point for new members, it's a pretty low collection of information. But this is not the only directory. Both the House and the Senate provide servers that have that they make available for a website for every member of Congress. So let's go out and look at her website. And while we're having that load, I'll let you know every website is customized for the member. So they'll all be a little different. They'll use different language. They'll have different organizations, but they almost always have the same types of things to expect. One is that you can sign up for their newsletter. So go ahead and do that if you want to. I'll close that now. So you should expect a section on issues, on their issues positions. And here it is right here. I'm selecting it. I'll pick economy and jobs. And I can tell you that every single one of these is going to say, please contact the office. They haven't filled it out yet. That will come, but again, we're working with very limited information right now. Each of them will have a section on media of some kind. This one very conveniently says media. This is where news releases will show up, maybe videos of interviews that they've done, copies of articles that they've had published in the paper. If we look at her press releases, we'll see she's been busy since she started. And you do get a sense of what she cares about based on these press releases. So she is not happy with certain energy decisions that are being made. She's in favor of the Space Command. She wants to overturn the federal mask mandate. She wants to hold the WHO and China accountable. It looks like she's gotten into a little bit of some battles with some fellow representatives. She voted no on the articles of impeachment. So you can start getting a sense of where she stands on things based on some of these news releases. There will also be a section that's called, will be something about the district. And on her page, it's under the About choice. So look at our district. My favorite thing about her district is that it's very well known for its peaches. I'm not, yeah. Okay, well, for some reason, it's not really browsing to that page. Oh, here we go. It is some of the country's best peaches come from there. What I care about the district is that I live in one of the most gerrymandered districts in the state of Ohio, and I'm not exactly sure what's in my district and what isn't. And even if you did know what was in your district, you might not know what's going to be in the next door district where you're trying to create a relationship with that member of Congress. So this is a way to get a good sense of what are the major industries, what are the major institutions, what are the major cities. When results coaches us to reach out to what we call grass tops, people who are influential in your community who might bring some sense of authority to the issues that we talk about, or who might already know the member of Congress and can give you an introduction. So what if you're working on a health issue and you know the CEO of the local hospital in your district, and that person has a relationship with a member of Congress, and she can call and say, give these people 15 minutes the next time you're in town. They have something really important to talk to you about. Or what if you know the head of the local medical school or the law school or the president of the university? And I can tell you, most university presidents find a way to make sure that they know the senators and members of Congress from their state. And they may be able to make an introduction. Maybe they'll go to the meeting with you. Maybe they'll join your results group, but that isn't necessarily what you need from them. What you may need is an introduction. And this About the District is a good way of starting to find out what's going on in the district and who might be the people who are influential with your member of Congress. Lisa, I see a lot of chat. Is any of that feedback that I need before I keep going?
We've been answering a couple of questions along the way, but one came up that is really germane to what you're working on right now. Is there any way to look up past committees that members of Congress have served on?
Probably. I don't know. I can't say I know right now, but I am happy to get an answer, and I can add it to the handout before we send it out. Off the top of my head, though, I'm going to say Wikipedia, because a lot of people spend a good deal of time making sure those Wikipedia pages are kept up to date, and they will often have a lot of historical personal information. But I'll see. I'm suspicious that the Library of Congress has kept those records and that there's a place where it can be looked up, and I will try to find out.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
So I want to duck over to one other place. So the next chunk of time we are going to spend is on Lauren Boebert's biography, which is here on her official House webpage. But before we take that time, I do want to show you there is one other site. It's great for all members of Congress, but it is especially good for new members of Congress. It's called VoteSmart. It's a directory that will be on your handout, and they research candidates as well as elected officials. And so they started collecting information on her the minute she started running. And so their information on her is a little more robust and complete than some of the other sites that only cover elected officials. So if you can see this really faint enter a politician's name, you would just put in a name and do the search. I opened the folder that says positions, And what VoteSmart does is they send a questionnaire to every single candidate and ask them to answer about their position on various issues. Lauren Boebert did not answer the questionnaire. So they cannot provide you with what her position is on any of these issues from her in her own voice. What they can do is scour her social media and her web pages and make inferences. So this green circle that's half filled is an inferred position. And the one I want to show you on this list is under the economy, it asks, do you support providing financial relief to businesses and or corporations for COVID-19? And she has an inferred position of yes. So that's very interesting in our results work around a COVID relief package. What you can't see probably is that there's a little expand button over on the side. And if you expand this, which I may not be able to do because of our pretty pictures. Anyway, if you expand this and look at where they made this inference from, it's from a couple of tweets that she made. And one is, I'm sick of debating stimulus packages, just let businesses reopen. And the other is, isn't it interesting that Congress sent checks out while big corporations got the money and small businesses weren't open yet? So they inferred that she would like to see some relief, but don't think that means she's up for a $1 trillion relief package. It's a much more specific and nuanced position that she is taking. So this is the closest we've come, other than her biography. I can tell you sometimes their campaign pages will have a really great issue section, but hers didn't. So I didn't want to waste the time showing it to you. And there's one other resource that you'll have a link to on your handout, which is a new members guide that is put out by the same people who handle our congressional directory that Results uses. It's a company called Fiscal Note. They made a guide for with biographical information about all of the new members, and there is several paragraphs about Lauren Boebert in there as well. I didn't think that anything in there was that different from what we are going to learn from her biography. So I'm going to go back to her biography now. And this is where I'd like to spend the next maybe 10 minutes with all of us talking about what we see there and how we could use that. So we'll open her webpage and we're going to go to under About. Oh, yeah. So here's her biography, what she wrote or someone wrote about her with her permission. What I'm going to do is give you all a chance to read it. I'm sure the Colorado people already have, but what we're going to do once you've had a chance to read it is I want you to give feedback on how you might take what you are learning about her in these several paragraphs and connect them to the issues that Results cares about. So I'm going to give us a minute to read it, and I'll scroll down, and then we can start our conversation. And if you can't see this very well, or if I go too fast, don't worry, because I'm going to pull out a couple of quotes from it at the end of this. Okay. So I'm sorry if that was too fast for some of you. I want to give you a couple of quotes just to, for those of you who may not have been able to see or read it. Representative Boebert was raised in a Democrat household on welfare. Her senior year of high school, she earned an opportunity to serve as assistant manager at her local McDonald's. She made the difficult decision to drop out of school to help put food on her family's table, realizing she could provide better for herself than the government ever could. Some of the things she's done are she's active in her church. She's been a volunteer counseling at-risk women who have been incarcerated. She has worked, she and her husband both work in the fossil fuel industry. She now owns a restaurant where their claim to fame is that all of the servers openly carry weapons. She ran because Washington is broken and she's sick of people not serving the people that they are supposed to represent. She will always defend the Constitution and protect our republic, to fight and eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. She focuses on an environment for economic growth and job creation. She cares about our nation's veterans and assuring that our men and women in uniform have the resources necessary to safely accomplish their missions. So those are some of the, probably the things that are closest to illustrating why she ran for Congress. And I'll be honest, I read this and thought that I didn't have very much in common with her. So I'm interested, instead of focusing on all of the places where we feel disconnected from her, I'm really interested in people sharing if they saw anything that they felt they could use as a starting point for a relationship with her and her office. And so feel free to put something in the chat, and Lisa, I'm sure will read that for us, or you can unmute and speak up.
Hi, I'm Sarah from Maryland. I think the fact that she was on welfare and the fact that she, saying that she had to drop out of school to take care of her family, like food needs, maybe that will be a place where she can empathize with the fact that we're trying to fight poverty and we're trying to put, food in plates as well.
Yeah, thank you. I believe that if she didn't, if her family didn't do it, they were almost certainly eligible for SNAP and for the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. And so as a family that benefited from it, or possibly benefited from it, she might very well understand what important safety nets those are. Thanks. Anybody else see something?
Yeah, it's Andy Clark from Gig Harbor. I'm actually associated. Hi there, Allison. Thanks. I'm associated with the group from Grand Junction in Boebert's district. What I've noticed is you normally start a relationship with one of the staff members, usually maybe one of the lesser staff people, until you can talk to the district director from that district. And that's the person that you need to get your foot in the door with first, usually before you ever get to talk with the member of Congress. But I was born and raised in Western Colorado, educated there, and went to elk hunting, had an uncle that was a peach farmer. So I see a lot of stuff in her biography I never knew before that you could mention, and like Marjorie just said, the child she had in the chat room, child care, I would think it'd be a big deal. So I guess my point is that it might not be the member that you're going to be dealing with to begin with anyway. You need to kind of connect with whoever the staff person is. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, I have something I can connect with her on too.
Go ahead.
Well, I've done work with the natural gas company in Chicago, and I've done some technical training in natural gas carrying and handling the materials and its delivery. I've done court work on its use and explosions in the city of Chicago from, failed gas lines and things. So that's one thing. Another thing is I've worked in the juvenile jail system in Chicago and as a social worker. So I think that's a kind of, she's connected with helping people, women in jail that I could connect with her on. And there's actually another issue that I feel comfortable with is looks like she sees herself as somebody who came up through the school of hard knocks. Maybe she doesn't see herself that way. It's important enough for her to have it on her webpage that she had to drop out of school to get enough money for her family, something that she felt she could do better than the government could do. Well, I've been homeless after college. Everything that I developed, my business, my corporation, the people that work with me, it's all been from a hard knocks perspective. I am clearly a white male that has privileges that other people don't have, but I can relate personally with her education and how strong her opinions must be, or passionate based on what she had to do to get where she is. So I would be listening very deeply and concerned about what she has to share, but I feel particularly close to her in some of this hard knock stuff. And that's what I would say.
Thanks. I really like the way both you and Andy is kind of matched up with the vocational connections. I mean, that we did the same things. We have the same, employment background, or in Andy's case, my uncle grew peaches. I mean, clearly that's a big deal in that district. And just having a point of personal connection like that, even if it doesn't relate to results issues, is a way to start humanizing each other. And I think that's really great. Lisa, is there anything in the chat that that we should include in this conversation?
People have just been giving really good ideas about how they can connect. Looking at, one person says, Kathleen Duncan says, looking at the picture of who I assume are her three sons, I might mention something about strong and healthy families. Marjorie says, with 4 boys, I would think that childcare might be a common concern. Just lots of different intersections. So it's been a good conversation in the chat.
Great. Thanks. I wanted to add, and the last commenter actually really started the thinking on this. I was looking back at our anti-oppression values, and our values are: we stand against all. I'll put them up for you. All kinds of oppression: classism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, colonialism, racism, white saviorism, ableism, xenophobia, religious discrimination, and we pledge to create a space for all voices. And when I think about someone who is 34 years old, and 2 pieces of information that I got in my research that I haven't shown you yet, so I apologize for that, are A, she beat a 5-time incumbent Republican in a primary in order to be in the general election and then win the general election. So she took on the established Republican in her district at the age of 34 with a GED. That's her level of education. And that's a remarkable accomplishment. And she has to have been treated like an outsider. She has to have been treated, I would imagine at times, with contempt. Certainly treated like someone who was separate from the political establishment. So she has, she has an outsider's perspective because when people go to Washington and they say, I want to change Washington, I won't let Washington change me, they are coming in as outsiders. They are proud of the fact that they're not political animals. They are bringing an everyday person into the halls of Congress. And I also think she probably has gotten very dismissed over time because of those characteristics that she had the nerve. She had the nerve at the age of 34. And all she's ever been is run a restaurant and worked in the gas fields. But somehow she thinks she could be a member of Congress. And lo and behold, she is. So that point about listening is, I think, a really great one. Just hearing what she would like to accomplish and what it took for her to get where she is. And really hearing where her passions lie. She comes across as someone whose passions lie in, preserving the Second Amendment. And it's very difficult to connect results issues to the Second Amendment. There's just no way that we intersect, that we can take that passion and say, well, don't you also want to make sure everyone gets vaccines? There's not an obvious connection there. But I think if we show the respect of listening to the accomplishment that she achieved, it can start at least again creating a human connection. So thank you all for that. The chat gets included in the recording, doesn't it, Lisa? So all those great ideas are preserved for posterity?
I believe so.
Okay, good. Because for the last few minutes, and I'm sorry I got started late because I let some technical difficulties get in my way. So this may feel a little rushed, but again, I'm always happy to demonstrate it again for you, and the information will be in the handout. But what I want to show you is another tool. It's called congress.gov. We're going to try to browse to it, even though my tabs are really weird up here.
Any chance I could make a comment while you're browsing?
Sure, please do.
She presents as a bully, and this talk of trying to identify with her, like I had a tough time coming up to. I don't think she would want to hear about any talk of vulnerability or difficulty. I look at her and she's kind of a young female version of Trump, that same energy coming at you that does not feel like a two-way street. So
right. Yeah, I understand.
What about
Marjorie.
that bully component?
There's a lot more to be said about it, and I don't want to miss out on this last piece, but this is what I'll say. The first thing is, no one in results is going to coach anyone to go and talk to a congressional office where they don't feel safe. So if this really is a situation where you don't think the office is open to a dialogue, you may need to let it rest for a while. On the other hand, I also think that she presents as a young female version of Trump, but maybe there's more there. And we're not going to know unless we give it the old college try. But again, only the old college try if you actually feel safe doing it. So, and I'm sure others will be happy to do some coaching around that individually. And your regional coordinators, Beth and Mary Kate, would be great on doing some of that as well. So I'm going to move on to the next thing just because I want to make sure we get to it, but thanks for sharing that. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is that the way that members of Congress learn about stuff is from each other. And it would be awesome if we knew which members of Congress talk to each other a lot. And, that's not generally available to us, but there is a way that we kind of can fake it. and that is by using this tool, congress.gov. It's the Library of Congress's legislative database. It has every piece of legislation that has been introduced since there was a Congress indexed in it. Includes links to the Congressional Record, which is the official transcript of the business meetings of the House and the Senate, the floor meetings, not the individual committees. It's a gigantic resource, and there are many, many things you can do with it. But I'm going to show you one little trick that you can do with it. If you browse to the legislation choice, which is here, right here on this very top level, pick legislation, which I actually already have. You get a filter bar down here on the side, on the right side. You can pick legislation from which Congresses. So I'm just going to pick the two most recent, just because it takes a really long time for the check marks to show up, and I don't want to waste your time. I will point out, while we're waiting for this to happen, that there are already 655 bills that have been introduced in this Congress, which just started on January 3rd. So there's a ton of legislation out there. Most of it never even gets considered. So pick a couple of Congresses and then go down here to this sponsor choice and open that up. And you can find your member of Congress here. And so we are going to use Michael Bennet. And I apologize to everyone who thinks that it's unfair that Colorado got 2 examples, but some of the other people hadn't ever introduced any legislation, so I couldn't use them for examples. So, oops, I'm going to go down to the Senate, and this is in descending order of the number of pieces of legislation introduced. So Robert Menendez was the busiest in the last 2 sessions, but they're all in there. So I'm going to find Michael Bennet. And he's introduced 83 pieces of legislation in the last 2 Congresses. And so now this display is just all of the bills introduced by Michael Bennet. And then I'm going to scroll down here to the co-sponsor choice. And I'm going to open that. And here are all of the people who co-sponsored a bill that Michael Bennet sponsored. So Michael Bennet's office wrote the bill. He is the initial person who brought it to the Senate and said, I want you to consider this. The rest of these people are people who signed on as co-sponsors after he introduced it. And it starts out in descending order of how often it happened. And his most common co-sponsor was Cory Gardner. So 13 times Michael Bennet introduced a piece of legislation and Cory Gardner co-sponsored it. And that makes sense in the sense that the 2 Colorado senators are working together for the benefit of Colorado. But it's also very interesting because one's a Democrat and one's a Republican, and we assume that there's such a deep partisan divide that no one's working together. But in fact, his most common co-sponsor was Cory Gardner, and his next most common, and then after Amy Klobuchar, his next most common co-sponsor was Rob Portman in Ohio. So why is this important? You all, let's say, have a really great relationship with Michael Bennet, and he is on board with something that we're working on. And we in Ohio really want Rob Portman to be just as interested in this issue as Michael Bennet is. Well, we're going to call you guys up and we're going to say, could you ask Senator Bennet to talk to Senator Portman? We are talking to him as constituents, but it would be really great if you could reach out and talk to him also. And we know that you have some common interests because for 9 of your pieces of legislation, he co-sponsored it. And we can continue down to discover exactly what those pieces of legislation are. I am not going to put you through that because it's a lot of, following links and following links and following links. But if this is descending order of relationship, but you can see all of them. So if I choose the show more it'll go to that alphabetical list and I can see every single person who co-sponsored something that Michael Bennett introduced. So twice, Lamar Alexander co-sponsored something that Michael Bennett introduced. And that's just in the last 2 Congresses. And you can go further back if you want to. You could find every place that they both co-sponsored something else. That is possible. I think it is less powerful though, because just because in a batch of 70 co-sponsors, 2 people both put their name on a bill, doesn't really mean that the 2 of them have a relationship. It just means they both have a relationship with the original sponsor of the bill. So I think it's much more interesting to look at the bills that your senator sponsored, that other people co-sponsored, or the other way around. It could happen the other way. You could say, Ohio, please ask Portman to talk to Bennett because we can't get anywhere with him, but he seems to have a good relationship with Rob Portman. So that is just one kind of, it's a little superficially data-driven. It doesn't tell you about the people who run into each other in the hall or on the floor of the Senate or in the cafeteria and have great conversations. We don't know about those, but at least we do know about this. So I'm mindful of the time. We've gone past the hour that we promised. We've gone about an hour total since we actually started the webinar. There is one more thing I was prepared to show you, and anyone who wants to stay on to see it is absolutely welcome. And I am not going to feel bad at all if people need to start dropping off because it's 9:30 or 8:30 or wherever it is where you are and you need your dinner or your bedtime. I will say that the handout has my email address and my phone number on it, so that if you need to be in touch with me to review any of this or want to schedule a session for your own groups, you're absolutely welcome to reach out. But I wanted to go back to that point that Andy Clark made about meeting with aides. It is true that quite often your first meeting is with an aide, and it sure would be nice to know a little bit of something about the aides. And of course, there's none of that in here. Maybe you get a name, but that's about the best you can do. Well, if you have LinkedIn, sometimes LinkedIn will have a nice little profile and you're able to figure out that this is actually that aide in that office. So as a little olive branch to the Florida and Georgia people who all had new members of Congress, and so a lot of the demos just weren't going to work for you, I looked up Maria Salazar's legislative director, and it's John Mark Kolb, and John Mark Kolb has a LinkedIn profile. And if you end up having a meeting with him, you'll be able to know a little bit about him. So you'll know where he went, what other jobs he has had, that he immediately came from the EPA, but before that he worked as a legislative assistant for several other members of Congress. He's worked in both the Senate and the House for a variety of people. Before that, he taught English as a second language at Central China Normal University. That's fascinating. He went to Mississippi College and graduated in 2010. And I have to say, as a baby boomer, I'm like, how can someone who graduated in 2010 already be a legislative director? And that's because he's in his 30s. He's not a baby, just because that seems very recent to me. It lists some of his certifications. Sometimes you'll discover that they're a returned Peace Corps volunteer, or that they taught in Teach for America, or all kinds of interesting things that you'll learn about them. And again, just a very interesting way to get to start building the relationship with that aide, when you can see what experiences you share or what experiences you just want to say, my goodness, how did you end up back on the Hill after being with the EPA? How do you know Representative Salazar? So there aren't a lot of really good ways for aides, but if you do have access to LinkedIn, many of them are on LinkedIn, and it's absolutely worth it. There are several other websites that I didn't plan to demo tonight because it just, as you can see, it takes a while when you're browsing online, when you're browsing live. But they will be on the handout and they may very well be useful to you. And I welcome any comments, questions, feedback. Like I said, I'll get the answer to that former committees and add it to the handout before we send it out. So I just thank you all so much for your attention, your engagement. I saw all the chatting going on. Lisa, thank you so much for handling that part of it and getting us going.
Very welcome.
That is the end for me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for being here. We are going to send out in the next few days, we're going to send out a communication to you through the way that you registered, and it'll have a link to the training and the handout. So look for that. If not this week, then early next week. And we just thank you so much, Allison, for sharing your expertise.
It's my pleasure. I love doing it. Thanks.
Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.